Good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is Andy Foberg, and I'm the President and CEO of the SDSU Alumni Association, as well as the current chair of the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce. Tonight is the fourth in a series of 5 opportunities hosted by the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce in conjunction with South Dakota State University to hear from campus and community leaders about Jacks Are Back and the Brookings Resiliency Collaborative, the planning groups working to bring students back to campus and Brookings safely. I'm joined this evening by Brookings City Manager Paul Briseno and South Dakota State University Vice President for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management, Michaela Willis. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Again, this is the fourth of 5 campus community Zoom forums, and we hope you will join us for each of these. You can find the schedule as well as video of previous conversations on the Chamber website, as well as SDSU's Jacks Are Back website. The last forum will be Wednesday, August 19th, with SDSU Athletic Director Justin Sell and Brookings High School Activities Director Randy Soma as our guests to discuss Jackrabbit and Bobcat athletics. Which brings us back to our guest this evening. We have a list of questions that have been submitted for our guests. If you have a question, please use the question and answer feature at the bottom, and we will answer those as time permits or at a future forum. Thank you again for joining us this evening. Vice President Willis, we're going to start with you. Since the last time we talked, you had announced some information about the university's move-in process, such as the drop and go. How has that process been going? What would you, could you please elaborate on final plans for students, what to not use in the drop and go option, how they will be coming to campus, those kinds of things?
Sure, Andy, and thanks for having me tonight. I can say drop and go has been going really well with about 25% of our residential students using this option. It will definitely help as we start our official move-in next week. Students not using drop and go will sign up for move-in time through an online system with a link that was emailed to them in their Jacks email account. And times will be in 1-hour increments with about 200 slots per day to spread out students and families moving in during this important time. Students with special activities or circumstances will begin moving in as early as Monday, the 10th. So it's coming pretty quickly. New students will move in between the 14th and the 16th of August, and our returners are slated for the 17th and 18th. Again, they have to sign up for that move-in slot online and can bring 2 guests with them to help move that couch upstairs or that futon, and those individuals just have to be 18 or older.
Great, thank you. Paul, the last time we had an opportunity to include you in one of these forums, you talked about community efforts to not only educate the community, but shared with community partners on how they can help prevent any spread of COVID-19 as we look to the fall. Can you give us an update on how that initiative is going?
Yeah, for the last 3 or 4 weeks now, we've had about 10 or 12 different community partners ranging from the university to the Chamber, Economic Development, CVB, hospital, non-for-profit organizations, just a number of community partners that come together on a weekly basis to talk about all of our marketing efforts, including the public schools. And that effort is to ensure that we're sharing a consistent and constant message to not only our current residents, but also those that will be coming to our community to help welcome them, but also understand what measures we're all taking to keep each other safe. That information is shared because we all have limited resources. It's essential that we communicate and work together to ensure that we keep everyone safe. So that's occurring every week right now. We also give an update to City Council of where we're at with the COVID, specifically to our community here in Brookings as well. So constantly communicating marketing. We also meet every Wednesday with the emergency management folks throughout the community, including SDSU, to be prepared for anything that might come here this fall or next spring as well.
Great, thank you very much. Vice President Willis, those first few days on campus are such an important time, especially for first-year students and getting them adjusted to campus and off to a successful start in college. What adjustments are being made during that first week, and is there still going to be a convocation, the traditional welcome to South Dakota State University?
Well, we're still committed to many of those welcome activities students have come to know and love as jackrabbits. So we will continue to host Convocation. We'll be splitting our students into 2 groups, with one attending on Monday and one group attending on Tuesday. And we'll also be hosting it this year in the Dana J. Dykhouse Football Stadium instead of Frost Arena. We'll have a virtual option for students as well. So if they don't feel comfortable attending in person, we'll do that. And then we will also host Thump Start. It will be held, but students will be split into much smaller groups, and we'll be using our classrooms around campus and receiving content into those classrooms via Zoom to broadcast. We have an opportunity to help our new students interact with our new classroom environments during Thump Start, follow those new protocols to keep everyone safe, and they'll have a true jump start on how to engage in the classroom environment because of how we're going to be hosting Thump Start this year. We'll have some choose your own adventure options as well, promoting local businesses that have signed that Brookings Stay Safe pledge, as well as exploring campus and community spaces like McCrory Gardens, the museums, the Dakota Nature Park, and more. And then we'll also have some programs offered virtually this year as well, such as the Student Organization Fair. So students will see a variety of programs and opportunities to get to know their new home here in Brookings.
Great. Paul, the City of Brookings recently extended its ordinance containing certain measures for businesses that allowed for in-person operation in a fashion that promotes proper social distancing, good hygiene practices, and the wearing of face masks by employees. Would you please update us on how the businesses have responded and how the city views the impact and importance of that ordinance?
Businesses here in Brookings, from what I understand, are doing a phenomenal job. For people that are watching, there's some misconceptions out there. The requirements for masks are for the salons, bars, restaurant workers, but retail workers do not have to wear the masks. We do require a barrier between the employee and the customer at the point of sale. So there are a lot of businesses here, national businesses, local businesses, that are, though, requiring those masks, which is great. We strongly encourage that. The ordinance currently in place also requires 50% occupancy at those businesses I noted. That does go into, or is in effect until September 8th. At the August 25th and the September 8th meeting, City Council will review that ordinance to determine whether or not they want to extend that or make any additional amendments to it as well. At next week's City Council meeting, we will be unveiling our phased approach for the community of Brookings, including thresholds, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that later on tonight.
Great. That ordinance does not account for kind of large outdoor events or gatherings. Has the council had any discussions or considerations of those?
Yes, the current ordinance does not, but the ordinance that we had prior, earlier in March through June, did have such regulation that impacted any outdoor activities or events, specifically at dwellings throughout the community, and it limited it to only the size of 10. So City Council can consider that as an amendment at the August 25th or the September 8th meeting if they should choose to do so.
Great, thank you. Dr. Willis, the university recently posted its COVID-19 safety levels that included green, yellow, orange, and red safety levels. The details of the safety levels are available on the website, sdstate.edu. Can you talk about how the university reviews its current safety level and determines where it will operate on a daily or weekly basis? Kind of how those are reviewed and how often?
Yeah, sure, Andy. So the different phases are for planning purposes, reflecting general planning guidelines for the campus decision makers within those 4 colors or safety levels. The color phase is determined by our COVID-19 response team, which meets 3 days a week in the mornings typically, and operates under the university's emergency management team. The operating level coincided with levels of COVID-19 transmission and thus the operational status of the university. We will make changes to the operational status of the university as necessary and based on those different safety levels and public health metrics and university health metrics. But as always, our health and safety are at the forefront of all of those decisions that we're making.
Great, thank you. Paul, similar, the City of Brookings is operating under a phased reopening plan. You kind of mentioned the phases ranging from 1 through 4. Can you elaborate on that phase planning and how the city continues to evaluate which phase it will operate under?
Sure. And we don't have the phasing up yet, but by next Tuesday afternoon, prior to the city council meeting, we will have it available on our city website, citybrookings.org. Encourage people to go out and take a look at it, provide any feedback on it. So we'll have up to 4 phases. Those phases will be based on our current ordinances. The most restrictive one that we have available to us that was reviewed and approved on first reading was a stay-at-home order. And so that's the most restrictive and only allows essential businesses to operate and then limits the mobility of residents throughout the community. The second phase that we have is the one that we had in place up until early June. And that is the closure of restaurants, bars, salons, and other community gathering place businesses throughout the community. It also does regulate a little bit what residents can do. The current ordinance, which would be phase 3 that we have, allows the occupancy of 50% at bars, restaurants, and salons, requires masks, what we just talked about. And there it does give some guidance to what residents should do throughout the community to protect themselves and others. And then we finally have the 4th phase, which would be, for lack of better words, the new normal that we always talk about. And so we have developed thresholds along with metrics that were created by our local professionals. And I would like to thank SDSU for helping us to develop those. Jason at the hospital, Vera at Sanford, and I believe USD also helped us with developing those thresholds. So over the course of the last 4 months, we've learned quite a bit. And I'm very thankful that we have such great professionals here in this community to help us determine what those thresholds and metrics should be, but also helping us to define those so the community can understand how we're going to move throughout those ordinances.
It was very kind of you to give credit to our neighbors to the north or to the south. You don't need to do that again on this particular webinar. Thank you. Vice President Willis, the Board of Regents recently adopted a COVID-19 face covering protocol that will require face coverings in all public areas. Can you explain the protocol and what it means to those individuals who will be on campus?
Sure. So about 2 weeks ago, actually, the Board of Regents did adopt an approach to face coverings on university properties, and it really includes 4 different levels, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And our protocol did go into effect on Monday, and all of the Board of Regents institutions are starting in level 3. What this means is that students, staff, and visitors will be required to wear face coverings in all indoor public spaces. This includes classroom buildings, the University Student Union, dining locations, Briggs Library, and in public areas in the residence halls and the Miller Wellness Center. However, there will be some exceptions that are pretty common sense. Students won't have to wear those in their private residence hall room, but they would be required in the common areas or if they have other students in their room who do not live with them. Everyone will have to wear them in the dining services areas, unless, of course, they're eating. You can't wear a mask and stick a chicken nugget in your mouth. So they will be able to take them off to eat. But once they're finished eating, they'll need to put on their face covering again. Individuals who are going into that Miller Wellness Center are required to wear face coverings in the facility, but would be allowed to remove them when working out. They are required when moving between machines or workout areas and halls or locker rooms to put those face coverings back on. They're not required when outside under level 3 protocols, although they would be highly encouraged when you're in high traffic areas where social distancing may not be maintained. And the level will be evaluated 30 days after classes start and then regularly thereafter. The level could go up or down depending on a variety of public health and university health factors, and it will really be determined on a university basis. So those levels won't be determined for all the Board of Regents institutions because we're all very unique in our community and university health factors.
Every time someone describes the face covering protocols and specifically around eating, they use chicken nuggets as an example. I'm not sure what that is, what that's about, how many we go through on campus, but it must be a lot. So on the flip side of that, Michaela, what's the penalty if someone refuses to wear a face covering?
So, I think it's important to know that some people may not be able to wear the same type of face covering based on lawful accommodations, but everyone will be able to wear something to protect others over their nose and mouth. So if someone doesn't have a face covering, our first response, of course, is going to be a very people-centered one, right in line with our core values as a university. We'll simply share that we're required to wear a face covering in indoor spaces at this time and ask if we can assist that individual with obtaining a face covering and direct them to the location closest to them where they might be able to obtain one. If they do fail to respond, they will be asked to leave the area, and appropriate SDSU conduct processes will be invoked depending on the individual status as a student, employee, or a visitor. So there are some teeth to it, but first and foremost, we're going to do the people-centered thing and just ask people to comply and help them find what they need to do that.
I feel good about Jackrabbit Nation complying with this. I really do. And I think, I don't think I'm being overly hopeful. I really think people are wanting to come back to campus and have this be an environment where everyone's safe. So I feel good about that. But on the chance that there are those that don't, there are protocols in place. Paul, we talked about the face covering requirements in the city's ordinance governing business. Is there any more conversation about expanding that face covering requirement in the city? And you gave a little bit of detail on what's actually required and what's not, but any additional conversation there?
Right now, staff has done quite a bit of research on whether or not cities in South Dakota can require face masks. What we found is you can. And with that knowledge, what we've done is research not only what other states, neighboring states have done, but what other municipalities, especially peer college communities, have done as well. So we have that language readily available should council want to make an amendment to any of the current ordinances or other ordinances as we move up or down that phased approach that I talked about earlier. So it's specifically up to the council right now whether or not they want to amend it through the August 25th and then September 8th meeting. Until then, what we'll do is concentrate on the education of the importance of wearing masks for not only for our families, but also the rest of our community.
Great, thank you. Dr. Willis, I want to shift a little bit. Testing is a conversation that is taking place at a number of different universities around the country. Where is SDSU with testing?
So SDSU's testing protocol is based on established medical protocols by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and also the South Dakota Department of Health. Testing has been available throughout the pandemic, and testing will continue to be available for students who display symptoms or have been identified through contact tracing through the South Dakota Department of Health through our student health clinic located in that Miller Wellness Center. SDSU has received 3 rapid test systems from the South Dakota Department of Health that will be implemented in our student health clinic for student testing. We're also encouraging students to use the health clinic resources for testing, and we're working to implement extended hours to include more evening and weekend hours. Of course, there continues to be great resources within our community as well through Sanford and Avera and Brookings Health System, and so those will be resources that might be available during times when our student health clinic in the Miller Wellness Center isn't available.
Great, thank you. A follow-up, what happens when a student or an employee does test positive? Who do they contact? What happens next? Walk us through a little bit of that.
Yeah, so we do have a pretty well-developed set of protocols on what we will do and what we have been doing when this has happened. From an employee standpoint, they'll need to contact their supervisor and the Associate Vice President for Human Resources, and really should not report to work if they've been tested and are awaiting those test results, or if they have a positive or inconclusive test or have been exposed to a positive or inconclusive individual. Students will need to contact my office, which will begin a process, and we will communicate isolation housing options for those students. It's important to note that the South Dakota Department of Health is responsible for all notifications, quarantine and isolation orders, and contact tracing, and we will work with the Department of Health officials to determine potential exposure that may have come from positive or inconclusive tests of an employee, student, or visitor. Any communications about potential exposure by the university will be at the direction of the Department of Health and will be narrowly tailored and to specific exposures and include no personally identifiable information. No general campus communication will be issued. Students will have two options if they've tested positive or inconclusive, or if they've been directed by the Department of Health to quarantine for 14 days due to exposure. They are of course, they can always return home immediately and stay there for that isolation or quarantine period. Nothing better than mom's chicken noodle soup when you're sick. And so that's always going to be an option. And the second option would be to move to our SDSU quarantine or isolation housing. My office and our housing team will coordinate the move and provide all those necessary resources for them to be comfortable and safe during that period. It'll include linens, healthcare, food delivery. They'll have a microwave and a fridge in there. And if needed, we'll also be able to provide technology to facilitate their continuation of virtual instruction. There won't be any charges for this housing for students either. And so really, we just want to reinforce that students should stay home when they're sick. They need to let us know if they're sick so that we can help them. And we all have the same goal, to stay in person here in Brookings through Thanksgiving. And to do that, we need everybody to share that information and isolate or quarantine if they need to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of resources available, and we need people to know that and be aware of that and then use them, right? So that's going to be important to keeping everyone here. Paul, in terms of testing and city resources, how is the city prepared to assist as the community looks toward an increase in its population as on-campus instruction kind of returns in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, so what we've been doing is identifying how we can help from a fiduciary standpoint. The city did receive we were granted $5.5 million from the state to tap into, to capitalize and help our community, and not only the existing residents, but also students, but we can only use them for very limited purposes. Testing is one of those opportunities. So we're trying to explore and find ways in which we can make that happen for people that need to have testing created either here within the community or elsewhere. And so once again, we're working with our partners to determine how we can make that happen. Beyond that, we are constantly communicating, coordinating between our community partners on a weekly, daily basis. We also have our local operation plan in place, ready to act. Our emergency operations center is on standby. We've also created a call center location as well, so that we can act in a moment's notice to help our local healthcare providers as well. And of course, we're a part of the pandemic plan for our community. So there's been a lot of planning, a lot of effort put in place over the last 3 to 4 months in anticipation of anything that should occur, but just as importantly, so that we're prepared when our students do come back to town.
Great, thank you. Michaela, before we close, one question that I know you get a lot is about on-campus events. I'm getting a lot of those questions. I'm sure you're getting even more of them. What is the university doing with campus events as it begins the fall semester?
Yeah, so first I'd like to say that our admissions office has reopened for campus tours again. They're doing it in a smaller group format, and the academic appointments continue to be held virtually, but a prospective student and up to 2 guests can visit campus again. So those of you looking at South Dakota State University, contact the admissions office and we'll work to get you set up for your campus visit. The big indicator for campus events, though, will be a safety protocol that the university is operating under. In green, most events will be able to return to their normal protocols. In yellow, events may occur in person with appropriate limits on the number of individuals that are present. In orange, we will do a lot more virtual events, but some limited face-to-face interactions and also some limits that are appropriate in terms of numbers of individuals present. And then if we move to red, that would mean that we'll go 100% virtual in programming. Our events plan really does define the types of events, logistics to hold an event, and all of the requirements for event managers to host a successful event. This can be found online at Jacks or Back on our website underneath the plan section. So feel free to check it out, but all of the SDSU sponsored events and any events held on our university property will, of course, have to follow those event protocols.
Great, thank you. Paul, while we're on the subject of events, we know the city has lost a number of large events since the pandemic began back in March. How has this impacted the city, and has the city been able to manage that impact effectively, or maybe how have you done that?
Yeah, so it really has impacted us financially. So our sales tax right now is about a negative 8% decreased. More importantly, our pillow tax, which comes from hotels, and our 3B from our restaurants and other establishments are down 30 and 60% respectively. And so that directly impacts our SWIFTEL, the CVB, economic development, and the chamber. And so it's important that we continue to work to have events here, but in a safe manner, if at all possible, whatever we can do to make happen, living within those guidelines of the CDC and the requirements of our current ordinance. So we mentioned earlier that phased approach that we have, the different phases 1 through 4. According to those different phases, we have specific requirements for those events and large group activities. So right now, the SWIFTEL, for example, has a plan in place to meet not only that ordinance, but they actually go above and beyond, providing masks for any participants that might request those, having signage throughout the entire system, having a substantial sanitation plan in place to protect those guests, but also communicating with those guests what the expectations are within our community so that we can protect our residents as well.
Thank you. We've had a couple of questions come in during our conversation, so I'm going to shift to those. So the question, and I will read it as it is written, I noticed that our neighbors down south, which is how I refer to them too, they're encouraging students to consider a 14-day quarantine pre-arrival to minimize the likelihood of bringing something to campus. Is SDSU, Michaela, sending any of those kind of messages, or what is that message that's being sent to students coming back?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thanks, Jennifer, for asking that. We are actually encouraging students to consider a 14-day quarantine prior to returning to SDSU this fall. The provost and I actually sent out a communication to all students about a week ago, really asking them to think about this and maybe not go to that bonfire with all of their closest friends before they come back, but instead try and limit their contact with others so that we can return in as healthy and safe of a manner as possible. So yes, we are doing that. In addition, we have launched a campaign that's called Jacks for All, hashtag Jacks for All, that's being led by our students to really promote all of those safe behaviors and social distancing and quarantining so that we can all return to campus and be safe this fall. So that's a great campaign that has been launched by our university and with students basically talking to students.
Yeah, that peer-to-peer effort is going to be very vital in all of this, for sure. The other question is, will there be an option for students who do better taking tests in person to return to their apartments the week after Thanksgiving for finals? Maybe students receiving special services. How would a student go about some of those kinds of things?
Yeah, sure. Another very good question. And while we are we're hosting our finals in a virtual format, our residence halls will be open. Our dining services will be available. The Briggs Library will be open. The Union will be open. And so for those students that do choose to come back after Thanksgiving to finish up those finals, they will still be held in a virtual format, but they will have access to all of those services and can return to the residence hall following that Thanksgiving break. There are some break housing and meal plan charges and things like that. For those living in apartments, they have a 12-month lease anyway. And so yes, those options will be available. We are not shutting the campus down, but we are asking students if they're able to remain home and finish up those finals virtually, just so that we can create as healthy and safe environment as possible.
Yeah. So last question, Michaela, what would you tell not only the students, but the community as we look to start the fall semester successfully?
Yeah, so our goal is the same, and that's to keep Jackrabbit Nation safe and healthy and to have our students' learning take place in person right here in Brookings in the classroom through Thanksgiving. We're all in this together, and I've been saying that a lot this summer throughout all of our new student orientation, but we are all in this together and everyone has to do their part. We know how quickly COVID-19 can spread, and we need to do everything we can to limit that spread. But we can all do small things that will make a really big difference. Wash your hands regularly, use hand sanitizer, wear that cloth face covering, use that physical distancing, stay home if you really don't feel good. All those things that, that we've been told really make a difference. We're also encouraging those students to self-isolate for 14 days before they return to campus. And did I mention, wear a cloth face covering? Lastly, we do have to support each other. All of us are impacted in one way or another with this pandemic. People will have emotions, they will have frustrations, there will be highs and lows, but we really need to support each other and know that we're all in this together. We're all in the same boat and have the same goals. So hope this will be a really great fall semester. We look forward to our students returning to Brookings, and I know that Brookings is looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a stressful time, but we are all in this together. And so we can get through this together. I think that's a good reminder for all of us to support one another in this. Paul, anything you'd like to add from the city perspective on this, or really anything we've talked about tonight?
Encourage everyone to download our newest app, Engage Brookings. We've been getting a lot of people downloading it, asking a lot of COVID questions. A lot of answers that we do have throughout our community and our community partners' efforts are located also on our webpage. We have a specific COVID webpage on our Brookings, citybrookings.org webpage. Also encourage people to like us on social media as well. We have a lot of great information. Bonnie Specker has been providing us with some great data that we try to provide on a daily basis, a weekly report on Friday, and we've just been trying to share as much information as we can with our residents and those individuals that will be sending their family members to SDSU this fall. Encourage them to look at that information as well and ask whatever questions they have.
That's a great call out. First of all, Bonnie Specker, so many of us have gotten some great information from her, but really a reminder of just how much work, and I want to thank the two of you, but so many people in both the city and the campus doing so much work to try to make this semester successful. And so I just want to thank both of you, but the entire teams that are really working hard to make this possible. And we're very excited about students coming back, but it's going to take all of us working together. And so I want to thank those who have been doing work and know that there's a lot of good work left to do. So as we close out the hour, I want to thank both of you for joining us this evening. Big thank you also to SDSU Director of Marketing and Communications, Mike Lockram, and President and CEO of the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce, Kelsey Doom, for their assistance in this event. Our next forum will be August 19th, and the guests will be SDSU Athletic Director Justin Sell and Brookings High School Activities Director Randy Soma. For more information on Jacks Are Back, please visit the website sdstate.edu/Jacks Are Back. Thank you all for joining us this evening.